I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was the type of kid who was good at math, bad at people, and terrified of failure. My dream job, if you can call it that, was to work in a quiet office, punch numbers into a spreadsheet, and clock out at 5. No surprises. No drama. No risk. But life has a weird way of forcing your hand. I graduated with a degree in finance in 2012, right after the recession's worst wave, and every job I applied to already had 200 other candidates who were more experienced and more desperate. I ended up doing part-time bookkeeping for a dentist and walking dogs for cash under the table. My savings ran dry. My confidence went with it. One night, while watching YouTube tutorials on Excel pivot tables, yes, that was my idea of Friday night entertainment, an ad popped up for an online course in e-commerce. It promised a six-figure income with just a laptop and the right mindset. Total scam vibes, but I clicked. I watched. And surprisingly, I didn't get pitched a $9.99 course. Instead, it was a simple case study of a guy who started importing Bluetooth headphones from China and flipping them on eBay and Amazon. That guy made $4K in a month. Not millionaire money, but more than I was pulling in from cleaning up dog poop and balancing molar-related expense reports. I went down the rabbit hole. Spent the next few weeks consuming everything I could find on Alibaba, Amazon FBA, shipping logistics, branding. I had exactly $3,187 in my bank account. I took $1, 500 of that, and ordered a small batch of phone holders from a manufacturer in Shenzhen. I branded them Grip Hook and paid a freelance designer $75 for a basic logo. The rest went to shipping and listing fees. They arrived looking slightly cheaper than I expected, but they worked. I listed them on Amazon, took a few photos with my cracked iPhone, and prayed. I sold out in 12 days. I couldn't believe it. $1, 500 turned into $2, 800. I reinvested it all. This time I ordered 500 units. They arrived, sold out in 3 weeks. I wasn't getting rich, but I was growing. I had momentum. My friends called it a lucky fluke. My parents told me to get a real job. Fast forward 6 months. I'd launched 3 more products: car vent mounts, wireless charging pads, and a sleek cable organizer I designed by tweaking a Chinese OEM design. I was netting around $4, 500 a month. Still living in my childhood bedroom, but I paid off my student loans and started thinking about moving out. The real turning point came when a competitor blatantly copied one of my listings. Same title, same images, same bullet points. I was furious. I contacted Amazon. They did nothing. So I got smarter. I hired a lawyer on Upwork to draft real brand paperwork. I registered Grip Hook as a trademark. I got brand registry on Amazon. Then I doubled down on customer service, added custom packaging, and started collecting emails with QR codes on the inserts. Suddenly, I wasn't just selling gadgets. I was building a brand. By year 2, I was pulling in $28,000/month in gross revenue with about a 28% net margin. I quit all side gigs. Hired my first VA in the Philippines to handle support emails. It felt insane. Like, this wasn't supposed to happen to me. I was never the hustler type. But growth isn't linear. It's a drunken roller coaster. Right after my 3rd year, Amazon suspended my account due to suspicious review activity. Turns out one of the freelancers I'd paid for marketing help had been buying fake reviews in the background. I lost my listing for 3 weeks, missed Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Revenue tanked. Cash flow dried up. I almost gave up, but I fought back. I pleaded, appealed, and eventually got reinstated. That mistake taught me the importance of owning my own distribution. I launched a Shopify store, drove traffic with Facebook and Google ads, and slowly reduced my Amazon dependence. It was harder, way less convenient, but safer. Around year 4, I got an unsolicited email from a mid-sized electronics company. They wanted to license one of my designs and slap their logo on it. I negotiated a $22,000 upfront payment and 6% royalties. That deal paid for my first warehouse space. Here's the funny part. None of this made me feel successful. Every time I hit a new milestone, the goalposts moved. $10K/month became $20K. then $50K. Then I want an acquisition offer. I started getting obsessed with exit multiples, EBITDA, and DDC podcast interviews. Eventually, I burned out. The hustle porn mindset wore me down. I hadn't taken a vacation in 5 years. I was micromanaging everything. My girlfriend left. I stopped sleeping. It took a brutal panic attack on a Tuesday morning. Palpitations, cold sweats, the works for me to admit I needed help. I hired a full-time ops manager, gave my VA more responsibilities, and forced myself to take weekends off. I went to therapy. I started running again. Now, it's been almost 8 years since I sold that first batch of phone holders. I employ 11 people full-time and contract with another 20 globally. GripHook did $3.8 million in revenue last year. We launched in Europe and are getting into brick-and-mortar retail. I finally moved out of my childhood home into a modest 2-bedroom apartment that I paid for in cash. And no, I'm still not a millionaire. But I have freedom. I have pride. I have control over my time. That matters more than any exit or fancy valuation. Here's what I wish someone told me before I started. Asterisk, you don't need to be a genius. Just be consistent. Show up every day. Asterisk, don't chase trends. Build something that solves a real problem for real people. Asterisk, hire help before you think you need it. Asterisk, learn the basics of accounting, taxes, and logistics. Outsource later, but understand it first. Asterisk, don't compare your Chapter 2 to someone else's Chapter 10. Asterisk, most of the gurus are lying to you. Real success is boring, unsexy, and repetitive. Asterisk, protect your mental health like your business depends on it, because it does. I never planned to be here, but I'm glad I am. Because now, when I look back at that scared, broke kid watching Excel videos at 2 a.m., I know exactly what I'd say to him. Keep going. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I've been running my own business for almost 8 years now, but the journey was anything but linear. From a startup in my tiny apartment to managing a moderately successful company today, I've learned more about failure, perseverance, and growth than I could have ever imagined. I'm here to share the ups, downs, and lessons I've picked up along the way, hoping it'll help someone out there thinking about taking the leap into entrepreneurship. Let me start from the beginning. I was fresh out of college with an engineering degree and zero interest in working in the corporate world. I had an idea for a product that I thought could change the way people experienced everyday tasks. It wasn't a groundbreaking, world-changing idea, but it was something I felt passionate about. The problem was, I didn't have a penny to my name. I knew I had to do something to make my idea come to life, but at that point, my options were limited. So, I did what every broke 23-year-old would do. I moved back in with my parents. My parents were supportive, but I could tell they were skeptical about my decision. They had always wanted me to go the safe route, get a stable job, climb a ladder, and make a decent living. But I couldn't shake the idea of building something for myself. I had this vision, and I was determined to make it happen, even if it meant risking everything. I started small. I spent the next several months learning everything I could about business and the specific market I wanted to enter. I spent countless nights reading blogs, listening to podcasts, and watching YouTube videos. I built a website from scratch using free tools, and I started cold emailing potential suppliers. I was doing everything myself: product design, marketing, customer service, you name it. My first product wasn't much, just a simple gadget that I believe could save people time in their daily routines. It was a combination of trial and error, making tiny improvements every week. After months of work, I finally had something ready to sell. I put the product up on my website, wrote a few blog posts, and shared it on social media. But nothing happened. No one bought it. My website was getting no traffic. At first, I was discouraged, but I knew I couldn't give up. I spent even more time refining the product and experimenting with different marketing strategies. I tried running Facebook ads, reaching out to influencers, and even offering discounts. Slowly, I started to gain a little traction, but it wasn't enough. The sales were barely enough to cover the cost of manufacturing and shipping, let alone the countless hours I had put in. But I couldn't afford to stop now. I had to get creative. I realized that I needed to build an audience first, before I could sell anything. I started offering free content in the form of helpful blog posts and videos that tied into the product. I began building a small email list by offering a free ebook in exchange for people's contact information. It was slow, but it was working. I had started to generate interest, and with a small community behind me, I began to see steady sales. But even with my first few customers, I ran into a whole new set of challenges. My packaging was too expensive, the shipping times were too long, and my supplier wasn't meeting the quality standards I'd hoped for. I spent weeks tracking down new suppliers, negotiating better deals, and tweaking my logistics. Eventually, things started to smooth out. My customer base grew, I hired my first intern, and I began to feel like I was finally getting the hang of this whole entrepreneurship thing. But just as I thought I had everything under control, the unthinkable happened. My main supplier went out of business. I couldn't believe it. The entire supply chain I had built my business on was suddenly gone. I was left with months of unpaid bills, angry customers, and a product that I couldn't even sell. It was one of the lowest points of my career, and I didn't know how I was going to bounce back. I could have closed up shop right then and there, but I was determined to keep going. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let it all slip away. I reached out to every supplier I could find, even those that were outside of my usual price range. I took out a small loan to cover the gap, and I focused all my energy on securing a new supplier and fulfilling the orders I had already received. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt like I was just spinning my wheels. But eventually, I found a new supplier who was not only more reliable, but also offered better prices. I learned that sometimes setbacks are just opportunities in disguise, even if they don't feel like it in the moment. With the supply chain issue resolved, I was able to regain momentum. I started reinvesting the profits back into the business, improving my marketing strategy, and expanding the product line. It was a slow and steady growth, but I felt more in control than I had in the beginning. One of the key turning points came when I realized the importance of hiring the right people. Up until that point, I had been doing everything myself. But as the business grew, it became clear that I couldn't do it all. I needed help. So I started hiring people who were smarter than me in certain areas: marketing, operations, finance. I made sure to build a team that could take the business to the next level rather than just rely on my own skills. In hindsight, I wish I had hired sooner. Having a talented team made all the difference. I was able to delegate tasks that were holding me back and focus on growing the business in new directions. It wasn't always easy managing people, especially since I've been used to doing everything on my own, but I learned how to communicate better, give feedback, and trust my team. Looking back, the journey hasn't been easy. There have been a lot of sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when I almost gave up. But each obstacle taught me something valuable, whether it was about managing cash flow, negotiating with suppliers, or building a brand. Today, my business is still growing, and I'm proud of what we've built. We're not a massive corporation by any means, but we've carved out a niche in the market, and we're steadily growing year after year. It's been a long road, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that the entrepreneurial journey is a marathon, not a sprint. Success doesn't happen overnight, and the setbacks along the way are often more valuable than the victories. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Stay persistent, keep learning, and never be afraid to fail. The road will be tough, but the rewards, both personal and professional, are worth it. I still remember the day I decided to go all in on my business idea, with nothing but hope, a little savings, and a lot of stubbornness. It was one of those moments where you either commit fully or let it slip away as just another what if. I was 28, working a corporate job that I hated, living paycheck to paycheck, and feeling like life was passing me by. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't keep working for someone else. I wanted to build something of my own, something that I could be proud of. The idea came to me late one night, after I had just gotten home from another exhausting day at the office. I was scrolling through social media when I came across a post about eco-friendly products. It struck me Why wasn't there a sustainable, affordable brand that could compete with the larger, more mainstream companies? Everyone seemed to be jumping on the eco-friendly bandwagon, but none of the products really stood out to me. They were either too expensive, not practical, or just lacked the creativity that could appeal to younger generations. It clicked instantly. There was a market waiting to be tapped. The next morning, I spent hours researching. I looked into product manufacturers, suppliers, potential competitors, and industry trends. I learned that the sustainable product industry was booming, but it was still fragmented. It wasn't easy to find quality products that weren't overpriced, and the ones that were affordable didn't have the kind of branding that would attract the everyday consumer. That's when I realized if I could create a brand that combined sustainability, affordability, and style, I might have something special. I knew it was a huge risk, but my corporate job had drained me. I was sick of the mind-numbing routines, the corporate politics, and the feeling that I was stuck in a never-ending cycle. The fear of staying stagnant and never knowing if I could have made it on my own pushed me to take the leap. So I started saving up what I could. I cut out all unnecessary expenses, started cooking at home, canceled subscriptions, and even sold things I didn't need. Within 6 months, I had enough saved to invest in the first batch of products I wanted to sell. I had zero experience in manufacturing or designing products. I wasn't a marketing expert, and I had no idea how to run an e-commerce website. But I figured I could learn along the way. I reached out to suppliers, went back and forth over email, and slowly built relationships with manufacturers who share my values. I designed my first collection of eco-friendly bags, using recycled materials and focusing on functionality and style. I worked with a small design team, basically a group of freelancers I found on LinkedIn, to create a brand identity that would resonate with my target audience, environmentally conscious millennials and Gen Z consumers. By the time my first shipment of products arrived, I was both terrified and excited. I spent weeks learning how to build a website from scratch, going through countless YouTube tutorials and reading blog posts about SEO, digital marketing, and sales funnels. I knew I had to launch online since I didn't have the capital for a brick-and-mortar store, but the thought of marketing a product I had worked so hard on was overwhelming. I had no budget for ads and no idea how to get influencers or bloggers to promote my products. But then, I had an idea. I reached out to a few smaller influencers in the eco-friendly and fashion space, offering to send them my products for free in exchange for honest reviews. Surprisingly, a few of them agreed, and the response was more positive than I could have imagined. Their followers started trickling in, buying my products, and leaving glowing reviews. It wasn't an overnight success, but it was a solid start. Slowly, things began to snowball. I continued working full-time on my corporate job during the day while building my brand at night. The days were long, and there were many nights where I barely slept, juggling emails, customer service requests, and product orders. My first year was a blur, full of mistakes and lessons. There were times when I thought I might just quit, but every little bit of progress kept me going. Whether it was a new order or a positive review, it all fueled my drive to keep pushing forward. The first major hurdle came when I ran into cash flow problems. I had miscalculated the demand for my products, and soon I was out of stock. I couldn't afford to place another order for more inventory, and I was stuck with a limited amount of product. I had to make some tough decisions. I considered borrowing money from friends and family, but I was too proud. Instead, I reached out to a few suppliers and negotiated better payment terms, which gave me just enough time to generate enough cash to place a larger order. That was a turning point. With a better understanding of my numbers, I invested in a small social media ad campaign. I targeted eco-conscious buyers in specific cities and saw a 20% return on investment. It wasn't huge, but it proved that the product had potential if marketed correctly. I started refining my marketing strategy, focusing more on customer testimonials, highlighting the brand's sustainability values, and offering limited-time discounts. By year 2, things began to take off. I hired my first full-time employee to help with customer service, and I outsourced logistics to a third-party fulfillment center. I could finally focus on growing the brand, scaling the business, and improving the products. We launched new collections, expanded our offerings, and found new suppliers who helped improve both the quality and affordability of our products. By year 3, I was able to quit my corporate job. It felt surreal. I had built a profitable business, and now it was time to focus on it full-time. I was no longer working for someone else's dream, but had created my own. There were still challenges, of course. The competition was fierce, and it was hard to stay ahead. But I had developed a loyal customer base, and word of mouth was working in my favor. Our revenue grew by 150% that year, and we expanded to international markets. Fast forward to today, and my company is now a well-known name in the eco-friendly product space. We've moved into new product categories, and our mission of sustainability remains at the core of everything we do. I've built a team of passionate individuals who believe in the same vision, and together, we've created a company that has had a positive impact on the planet. Looking back, it wasn't just the products that made the difference. It was the relentless drive to push through the tough times. Entrepreneurship is a roller coaster, and I had to learn to embrace the ups and downs. There were moments when it felt like I was losing, but every setback taught me something valuable. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success isn't about avoiding failure. It's about how you handle it when it comes. The key is persistence, learning from mistakes, and keeping the bigger picture in mind. I'm proud of where I am now, but I'm also grateful for every moment of struggle. Without it, I wouldn't have become the person I am today. The person who isn't afraid to bet on themselves, to take risks, and to turn a small idea into a thriving business. So, here's the long version of my entrepreneurial story, one that has taken me through the highest highs and the lowest lows of my life. I've been running my own business for 6 years now, but it definitely wasn't a smooth ride from the beginning. In fact, it was one of the most unexpected journeys of my life. A bit of context. I'm a 30-year-old who grew up in a working-class neighborhood. My parents were blue-collar workers, and money was always tight. As a kid, I didn't know the first thing about entrepreneurship or building a business. What I did know was that I wanted something more than the standard 9 to 5. I wanted to create something that wasn't just a paycheck, but had purpose and meaning. After high school, I went to college, got a degree in business management because, hey, that seemed like the thing to do, and started working in corporate sales. I hated it. I had a steady paycheck, good benefits, and an office, but the work was soul-crushing. I could tell that I was just another cog in the machine. The idea of doing this for the next 40 years was something I couldn't wrap my head around. So, at 24, I made the leap. I quit my job with a little savings cushion, a ton of ambition, and an idea that I thought was going to change my life. I decided to launch an online clothing brand. Why clothing? Well, I was always passionate about fashion, and I dabbled in design in college. At the time, I thought it was a good mix of creativity and commerce. I spent weeks, probably months, researching, designing, and planning. The whole thing was built around a concept that was supposed to be edgy and unconventional, or so I thought. I had this idea of selling clothes that appealed to the hipster market, combining modern streetwear styles with a little artistic avant-garde flair. In theory, it was a great idea, but the reality? Not so much. The first few months were brutal. I spent thousands of dollars on inventory, hired a web designer to build my e-commerce site, and invested in marketing. I didn't know much about online ads or SEO back then, so I relied heavily on Instagram influencers to promote the brand. The influencers didn't really work out the way I thought they would. A few of them didn't post when they said they would, others didn't engage with their followers as much, and I barely saw a return on investment. That's when the first wave of doubt crept in. I'd wake up each day to check my sales, hoping for a miracle, but there was none. The orders were trickling in, but the revenue wasn't enough to cover my overhead. I found myself working 2 part-time jobs just to keep the business afloat, while I continued to learn about what was going wrong. Things got worse before they got better. My manufacturing partners started to fall behind on orders, and the quality of the clothes I was getting back was nowhere near what I had envisioned. I'd sell a batch of shirts, only to have customers return them because the stitching was bad or the material was subpar. I felt humiliated every time I had to apologize to a customer for sending them a defective product. By year 2, I was in full-on panic mode. My credit cards were maxed out, I had borrowed from friends, and I was seriously considering closing everything down. My savings were almost gone, and I had no plan for what came next. I was ready to call it quits. But something inside me refused to give up. I thought, if I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail on my own terms. So I started to change things. First, I took a hard look at my marketing strategy. I went back to basics and studied successful brands in the industry, how they use content, how they built communities, and how they engage with their customers. I realized that I had been treating my customers like transactions rather than building relationships with them. So I started focusing on creating a brand narrative. I began sharing my own journey on social media, about my struggles, my failures, and my dreams, and people started responding. Slowly, I noticed that my followers were becoming more than just numbers. They were real people who cared about what I was doing. I also started experimenting with different products and designs. I realized that I was trying to be too edgy when my target market was simply looking for quality, reliable, and fashionable pieces. I listened to my customers' feedback, adjusted my designs, and began to offer things that people actually wanted. The breakthrough came when I launched a limited edition line of simple, high-quality graphic tees that sold out in a matter of days. It was a small success, but it was the first one I'd had in 2 years. By year 3, I had finally hit a bit of stride. Sales were up, my website was more optimized, and I had learned how to run Facebook ads effectively. I brought in a small team to help with customer service and production, and I started outsourcing the parts of the business that were eating up too much of my time. But just as things were looking better, I was hit with a massive challenge. The pandemic hit. Suddenly, my online store was seeing a surge in traffic, but the supply chain was completely disrupted. My suppliers were closed, shipping was delayed for weeks, and I couldn't even get products to customers on time. I thought for sure I was done. I was scrambling to stay afloat, but I had no choice but to adapt. I pivoted, and instead of focusing purely on clothing, I introduced home and lifestyle products. I launched a series of comfortable loungewear sets that were perfect for the stay-at-home life, and they were an instant hit. By year 4, my business was doing better than ever. I had learned how to manage my finances, streamline my operations, and scale at a sustainable pace. I expanded into wholesale and began selling my designs through major retailers, which is a whole new world for me. I found that despite my rough start, I had developed a solid foundation of loyal customers who appreciated my transparency and my dedication to delivering quality. Fast forward to today, 6 years in, and I'm not where I want to be yet, but I've come a long way. The business has grown beyond just me and a small team. We now have a warehouse, a dedicated marketing team, and a growing customer base that spans across the globe. We've launched new product lines, and the brand is recognized in certain circles. I'm proud of what I've built, but I never forget how close I came to giving up. The lessons I've learned? Perseverance is key, and you have to be willing to reinvent yourself as often as necessary. You need to embrace failure, not as an obstacle, but as a lesson. But above all, you have to care deeply about the people you're serving. The numbers will always fluctuate, but your customers, the real ones, will be the ones who stick by you. So that's my story. The journey's far from over, but I'm glad I kept going, even when it seemed like the end was right around the corner. So, I never thought I'd end up being an entrepreneur. In fact, for most of my life, I thought I was the farthest thing from one. But that all changed about 5 years ago, and the path I've taken since has been one of the most unexpected and rewarding journeys I could have imagined. I'm a small-town guy, grew up in a sleepy little community where everyone knew everyone, and life was simple. My parents were both teachers, so I always had a good sense of the value of education and hard work, but I never had any big dreams of becoming a millionaire or anything like that. I was just happy being comfortable and doing my thing. I had a steady job at a local grocery store after I graduated high school, then moved on to a retail job when I was in college. Nothing too exciting, but it paid the bills. But then came the turning point, the moment that would change everything. I was working a retail job, stacking shelves and helping customers, when I overheard 2 guys talking. One was talking about his e-commerce business, how it was growing fast, making tons of money, and how he had started it from nothing. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured it was just another one of those get-rich-quick stories, like the ones you see on infomercials or hear about in late-night TV ads. But then something clicked. I realized that these guys weren't talking about some get-rich-quick scheme. They were talking about a real business, one that required a lot of effort, dedication, and strategy. That's when I got the idea. Why not start my own online store? At first, I didn't know anything about e-commerce or running a business. I wasn't even sure where to begin. I had no money to invest, no mentor to guide me, and no experience in marketing or sales. But I couldn't shake the thought of starting my own business, so I started researching. I spent countless nights reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and trying to figure out how the whole e-commerce thing worked. Eventually, I decided to take the plunge. I was living with my parents at the time, so I didn't have a ton of expenses. I figured if it didn't work out, I could always go back to my regular job. But deep down, I knew I had to at least give it a shot. So I scraped together a few $100s, bought a domain name, and set up an online store selling phone accessories. Looking back, my first website was a complete disaster. It was ugly, clunky, and not at all user-friendly. But I didn't know any better. I launched it anyway, thinking that if I just had the right products, people would come flocking to my store. Spoiler alert, they didn't. In fact, no one came. For the first few months, my website was a ghost town. I had a couple of friends and family members who bought stuff just to support me, but beyond that, crickets. It was discouraging. I was spending long hours trying to figure out what was wrong. I read more articles, joined online forums, and started getting advice from people who had been through it. Slowly, I began to realize that it wasn't enough to just have products on a website. I needed to market those products, build trust, and understand my customers. So I made some changes. First, I revamped my website. I hired a cheap freelance web designer to clean it up and make it look more professional. I invested in better product photography and made sure the descriptions were clear and appealing. But the biggest shift came when I started focusing on social media marketing. I had heard that social media was a powerful tool for driving traffic to an online store, but I had no idea how to use it properly. I started studying Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, trying to understand how successful e-commerce businesses were using these platforms. It wasn't easy, but I began experimenting. I created content that showcased my products, shared tips and tricks for phone care, and even made funny memes. Slowly but surely, I started to gain traction. My followers grew, and people began commenting and engaging with my posts. It wasn't a huge flood of sales right away, but I could tell that I was starting to build an audience. I learned a lot in those early days, but the biggest lesson I took away was persistence. Even when things weren't going well, I kept pushing forward. And then one day it happened. I got my first big sale. It was a customer I didn't know, someone who had found my store through social media. I remember feeling a rush of excitement and disbelief. Someone, an actual stranger, had bought something from my store. It wasn't much, but it was a start. From there, things slowly but surely started to snowball. I continued refining my marketing strategies, tweaking my website, and experimenting with new products. I invested in paid advertising, and I started seeing a real return on my investment. My sales began to grow, and within a year, I was making more money than I had at my retail job. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. I had my fair share of setbacks. There were times when I ran out of stock, times when I made mistakes with my advertising campaigns, and times when I doubted myself. But each time, I picked myself up, learned from the mistake, and tried again. Fast forward to today, and I'm running a six-figure business from the comfort of my own home. I've expanded my product range, hired a small team, and even launched a second online store. I've been able to quit my day job, and I'm now living a life that I once only dreamed of. I'm able to travel, work on my own terms, and focus on the things that matter most to me. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. 5 years ago, I was just a guy working a retail job, unsure of what the future held. Today, I'm an entrepreneur, something I never thought I'd be. The journey hasn't been easy, and there are still challenges ahead. But if I've learned anything, it's that success doesn't come overnight. It takes hard work, determination, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. And most importantly, it takes the courage to take that first step, even when you have no idea where it will lead. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Just go for it. Do your research, take small steps, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. If I can do it, so can you. The road may be tough, but the rewards are worth it. I was 22 when I started my first business. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, zero. All I had was a passion for graphic design and a burning desire to never work a 9 to 5 job. That was the dream, right? To make something of my own, build something I could be proud of, and not have to answer to anyone but myself. But here's the thing no one tells you when you start a business. It's not as glamorous as it seems. Everyone talks about the success stories, the million-dollar exits, the growth, the freedom, but they rarely mention the countless sleepless nights, the endless grind, the constant failure, and the moments where you feel like giving up is the only option. I've always been creative ever since I could remember. As a kid, I was the one doodling in the margins of my notebooks during class. My obsession with art grew as I got older, and by the time I hit college, I was taking as many graphic design classes as I could. But I realized something: I didn't just want to design. I wanted to run my own business. I wanted to create something that was bigger than me, something that I could pour all my energy and ideas into and see it come to life. So I decided to take the leap. I figured, why not start a design agency? I had a decent portfolio from college, a few small freelance gigs under my belt, and enough confidence to think that people would pay for my work. I didn't have any business training, no mentors guiding me, and absolutely no idea how to navigate the financial side of things. But hey, what could go wrong, right? I registered the business online, slapped together a website using a free template, and sent out emails to local businesses offering my services. I remember the first few responses: sorry, we're not interested. That was a tough pill to swallow, but I kept going. I needed clients, and I wasn't about to back down just because a few people said no. The first real break came when a small startup reached out. They needed a logo, branding, and a website. I was over the moon. This was my big chance. I poured every ounce of effort into it, working late into the night, refining designs, researching trends, and making sure every detail was perfect. I delivered the final project, and they loved it. In fact, they loved it so much, they referred me to other businesses. Word of mouth is a powerful thing when you're starting out. But even with that small win, things were far from easy. I still didn't know how to price my services, and I often found myself undercharging just to get the work. I didn't have a clear understanding of my expenses or profit margins, and there were months when I barely made enough to cover my bills. It was hard, really hard, but I kept pushing through. Every client, every project was a small step towards something bigger. Then came a pivotal moment that changed everything. I was doing a rebrand for a mid-sized company, and during one of the meetings, the CEO pulled me aside and said something that stuck with me. You're really good at what you do, but your business doesn't have any structure. You're all over the place, and it's holding you back. At first, I took offense. What did they know about running a business? But as I reflected on it, I realized they were right. I was all over the place. I was doing everything myself: design, marketing, sales, accounting. I didn't have systems in place, and it was starting to show. I wasn't scaling. I wasn't growing. I was stuck. I decided then and there to take a step back and rethink my approach. I started educating myself, watching YouTube videos, reading business books, and reaching out to mentors who could give me some guidance. I realized I had to treat my business like an actual business, not just a creative hobby. The first thing I did was hire a part-time assistant to handle the administrative side of things. That freed me up to focus on what I was good at: designing and building relationships with clients. I also started getting serious about my pricing. I started tracking my expenses, and I raised my rates to reflect the value I was providing. At first, I was nervous about pricing myself out of the market, but to my surprise, clients didn't bat an eye. In fact, they seemed to appreciate the professionalism and the higher-end services I was offering. As time went on, I realized that I needed to stop thinking like a freelancer and start thinking like a business owner. I needed to scale, hire a team, and delegate. The idea of hiring people was terrifying to me. I wasn't sure how to manage employees or if I could afford to pay them. But I took the plunge and hired a few freelance designers. With them on board, I could take on bigger projects and start building a real agency. By the time I was 27, my business was growing. I had a team of 5 people, and we were working with some big-name clients. The money wasn't flowing in like I'd imagined, but it was steady, and I was finally able to pay myself a decent salary. Still, I was running into challenges. As the business grew, So did the complexity. Managing people, handling client expectations, and keeping the creativity flowing, it was a constant balancing act. The next big hurdle came when I got too comfortable. We had a steady stream of work, and I got lazy. I stopped innovating and just focused on the day-to-day grind. Our designs became stale, and we lost some clients. That was a wake-up call. I had to evolve, or we'd get left behind. So I pushed the team to think outside the box. I encouraged them to take risks with their designs, experiment with new tools, and challenge the status quo. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but eventually, we found our groove again. We started getting recognition, landing bigger projects, and expanding into new markets. Now, at 30, I'm running a thriving design agency with a team of 15. We've worked with clients all over the world, from small startups to multinational corporations. I'm no longer just a designer. I'm a CEO, and I've had to learn a whole new set of skills along the way. I'm still learning, still making mistakes, but I'm proud of how far I've come. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown, not just as a business owner, but as a person. The journey has been anything but smooth, but every struggle, every setback has taught me something valuable. I've learned that success doesn't come from avoiding failure, but from learning how to keep moving forward even when things don't go as planned. And to anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple. Don't give up. It's going to be hard. It's going to test you in ways you never imagined. But if you keep pushing, keep learning, and keep improving, you can build something great. Don't let the tough times discourage you, because on the other side of those challenges is growth and success. And trust me, it's worth it. This is a story about how I went from a broke college dropout to a successful entrepreneur. I started with nothing but a lot of grit, a couple of loans, and an idea that nobody believed in. I hope my story inspires some of you to take the leap and chase your own dreams, even if they seem impossible. I was always the type of person who hated the idea of working a 9-to-5. Growing up, I watched my parents grind away at their day jobs, barely scraping by. They worked hard, but they never seemed to get ahead. The bills always piled up, and there was never any extra money for the things that mattered. When I was in high school, I told myself I wouldn't fall into that trap. I would find a way to create something of my own. In college, I took a business major because I thought it would be my golden ticket. But honestly, the more I learned, the more I realized that everything they taught seemed outdated. It was all theory with very little real-world application. I tried starting a few small side projects in my spare time, selling custom t-shirts, flipping products online, but they never really gained traction. My big turning point came during my second year of college. I had just turned 20, and I was struggling to keep up with my studies. I was living paycheck to paycheck, trying to keep up with tuition fees and rent. One night, I found myself sitting in my dorm room, looking at my bank account, and realizing I was about $500 short for rent. That was the breaking point. I had a breakdown and decided I couldn't keep going like this. I needed to do something different. I dropped out of college the next day. It was a hard decision, but deep down, I knew it was the right one. I had no safety net, no backup plan, and no real skills. But I had an idea, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make it work. That idea came about when I started looking at the e-commerce space. I had been selling products online as a side hustle for a while, and one thing that stood out to me was how difficult it was to find quality suppliers. I kept running into the same problem. Many of the manufacturers and wholesalers I worked with either had poor customer service or overpriced products. It dawned on me that if I could connect people with reliable suppliers in a more efficient way, I could build a business that filled a serious gap in the market. So, I decided to build a platform where small businesses could easily find trustworthy manufacturers and suppliers. I didn't know how to build a website, and I had zero coding experience, but I knew I had to try. I spent the next few weeks learning how to build a simple website and creating a basic version of what I envisioned. I even reached out to a few local suppliers to see if they would be interested in joining the platform. To my surprise, a few said yes, and that gave me the confidence to keep going. At the same time, I had to figure out how to fund this venture. I didn't have any money saved up, so I took out a small loan from a family member. It wasn't much, just enough to cover the basic costs of building the website and paying for some initial marketing. I remember feeling like I was betting everything on this project. If it didn't work out, I'd be in a lot of trouble. I launched the website with just a handful of suppliers and a couple of features. It was far from perfect, but I was determined to get some traction. I started promoting it through social media and reached out to a few small businesses to see if they would be interested in using the platform. The response was lukewarm at first, but I kept pushing. I sent out hundreds of cold emails, offering free trials and discounts to anyone willing to give the platform a shot. Slowly but surely, things started to pick up. I began seeing some small sales coming through. More suppliers started signing up, and I was able to hire a part-time developer to improve the website. The more users I got, the more feedback I received, and I started making changes based on that input. Each tweak brought the platform a little closer to what I had envisioned. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were countless obstacles along the way. There were days when I had to skip meals just to make sure the bills were paid. There were times when I questioned whether I was wasting my time. I even had a few suppliers who backed out after promising to be part of the platform, which set me back financially and emotionally. But I kept reminding myself why I had started this in the first place, to create something bigger than myself, something that could help people. The first major breakthrough came about 6 months into the business. I had been working nonstop to improve the platform, and finally, a well-known influencer in the e-commerce space took notice. They mentioned my platform in one of their videos, and overnight, traffic to the site exploded. I wasn't ready for the influx of new users, and the site crashed multiple times, which was both terrifying and exhilarating. But with the help of my small team, we got things back online quickly. That moment was a game changer. Suddenly, I had hundreds of new users signing up every day. The platform was gaining momentum, and I knew I needed to scale fast if I wanted to keep up. I took out another loan to invest in better infrastructure and hired a full-time team to help manage operations. I also hired a few more developers to add new features and improve the user experience. Over the next year, the business grew exponentially. We expanded into new markets, added more suppliers, and even launched a mobile app. By the time I turned 22, I was making 6 figures in revenue. I had built something from scratch, and it was finally starting to pay off. Looking back, it's crazy to think about how far I've come. There were so many times when I could have given up, when things got too hard, or the money ran out, or when I had doubts about whether I was even cut out for entrepreneurship. But what kept me going was a relentless belief in the idea and the conviction that if I work hard enough, I could make it work. Now, I'm 25, and the business is still growing. I've expanded into new verticals, and I'm looking at ways to scale even further. I've been able to hire a fantastic team, and together, we're building something that's changing the way small businesses operate. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that persistence is everything. There's no secret formula for success, no magic shortcut. But if you're willing to put in the work, face the setbacks, and keep pushing forward, you'll get there eventually. So, to anyone reading this who's thinking about taking the leap into entrepreneurship, do it. The journey will be tough, and you'll have moments where you want to quit. But trust me, it's worth it. Keep pushing, keep learning, and never lose sight of your vision. You never know where it might take you. The story begins in a cramped apartment in a small city, where a 22-year-old recent college graduate, was trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. I had a degree in marketing, but I had zero idea what I was supposed to do with it. It's funny how society pushes you to figure out your life before you even know how to tie your shoes properly. The whole everyone has a path, and you just have to find it. Rhetoric really messes with you. I graduated in the middle of the pandemic, so the job market was absolutely terrible. I'd sent out dozens of resumes, but they just kept getting ignored. I even tried applying to remote jobs, thinking that would be my golden ticket. But after a few weeks, I realized that my inbox was just as empty as when I started. I felt like I was stuck in a loop, watching the world go by while I was just standing still. After a while of sending resumes with no response, I decided to do something different. I'd always had a passion for photography, but I never thought it was something I could make money off of. It had been a hobby for as long as I could remember. But now, with nothing to lose, I figured, why not? So, I took my old DSLR camera that had been collecting dust and started practicing more seriously. My friends and family encouraged me, but I was still skeptical. Was there really a market for someone like me? Could I turn this passion into something bigger? I didn't have a fancy studio or professional equipment. I didn't even know where to start. So I did what anyone with too much time on their hands would do. I spent hours scrolling through Instagram, looking at photographers' profiles. I saw a lot of people offering services like event photography, portrait sessions, and product shoots. It clicked. Maybe I could try this too. I wasn't sure how to find clients, but I figured I could use social media to get the word out. At first, it was incredibly slow. I made a simple Instagram account, posted my best shots, and waited. Nothing happened for the first couple of months. I shot a few pictures for friends, a couple of family members, and posted them to my page. Slowly, I gained a few followers, but they were mostly people I knew. I was still in that what's the point phase, wondering if I was wasting my time. But then, one random day, a local cafe I had never been to before reached out. They had seen my work on Instagram and wanted me to take some photos for their new menu. I could barely contain my excitement. I'd never been paid for my photography before, so this was huge. I said yes before they even finished explaining the details. The shoot went better than I could have imagined. The cafe loved the photos, and they ended up using them for their website, social media, and printed menus. The manager even gave me a generous tip, which, in hindsight, was more than I expected for a beginner. That was the turning point. That's when I realized that I could actually make money from this. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had a foot in the door now. I knew that if I wanted to take this seriously, I needed to level up my game. I reinvested every dollar I earned from that cafe gig into better gear, lenses, tripods, and even new camera body. I also invested in online courses to improve my editing skills and learn how to market my services more effectively. I was working day and night, learning everything I could about photography and business. But the most crucial decision I made was to specialize. It didn't take long for me to realize that there were hundreds of photographers out there offering everything from wedding shoots to family portraits. I didn't want to blend into the crowd. So I decided to focus on one thing: food photography. Why? Because I loved food, and I noticed that local restaurants, especially small, independent ones, were lacking high-quality, professional images for their menus and online presence. The next few months were a roller coaster. I sent cold emails to dozens of restaurants, bakeries, and food trucks offering my services. Most of them ignored me. A few replied, but they were either too busy or didn't see the value. I was rejected over and over again, but I kept going. I knew it was just a numbers game, and eventually, someone would give me a shot. That someone turned out to be a small taco truck that had recently opened in my city. They responded to one of my cold emails and asked if I could come take a few photos of their food for their Instagram. The shoot went surprisingly well. I spent hours capturing their signature tacos, salsa, and guacamole. They were thrilled with the results and offered to pay me on the spot. That was my first real food photography gig. From there, things started to snowball. I used that taco truck as a case study and shared the photos on my Instagram, tagging the truck and adding a short testimonial from the owner. Slowly but surely, more restaurants began to reach out. I wasn't charging much at first, just enough to cover my expenses and maybe a little extra. But with every new client, my skills improved, and so did my rates. By the end of the year, I had gone from taking free photos for friends to booking paid gigs with some of the best-known eateries in town. I was finally making a steady income from photography. But I wasn't done yet. I knew I needed to think bigger. I wanted to scale, to grow beyond just me with a camera. I started networking with other photographers and videographers, trying to learn from them and see if I could collaborate on larger projects. I eventually built a small team, one photographer and one editor, so I could take on larger events like restaurant openings and food festivals. It was a bit of a risk, but it paid off. With a team in place, I was able to expand my reach and offer more services. We started shooting not just food, but also behind-the-scenes content, chef profiles, and even recipe videos for Instagram and TikTok. The demand for high-quality food content was growing, and I was positioned perfectly to capitalize on it. Looking back, I realize how much luck played a role in my success. But luck doesn't work unless you're willing to put in the hard work and take risks. I could have easily given up when I faced rejection or when things were moving slower than I wanted. But I kept pushing, learning, and adapting. Now, just a few years later, I have a successful food photography business with a steady stream of clients. I worked with some of the biggest names in the food industry, and my photos are featured in magazines, on websites, and across social media platforms. The best part? I wake up every morning excited to work, which is something I never thought I'd be able to say when I was stuck in that small apartment, unsure of what came next. My advice to anyone out there feeling lost or stuck is simple. Keep going. Try different things, fail fast, and learn from it. Don't let anyone tell you that your dreams aren't achievable. Your path may not look like everyone else's, but it's yours to shape. You never know when the next opportunity will come, but you have to be ready to grab it when it does. And trust me, it's worth it. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. It's 2014, and I'm in my small studio apartment in Brooklyn, New York. The city is buzzing with energy, and I'm sitting at my desk, staring at a cluttered spreadsheet on my laptop, trying to figure out how to make my startup succeed. I had no previous business experience. My background was in design, but somehow I had fallen into this idea that could either make or break me. It started a few months earlier when I was working at an agency. My day job was good, but it wasn't fulfilling. It felt like the creative freedom I once had was being squeezed out. At the same time, I noticed something strange happening in the market. People were starting to care more about how things were made, the origin of the products, and the stories behind them. As a designer, I was in a unique position to understand both the artistic and commercial sides of things. I had this idea to create a sustainable fashion brand that focused on telling stories through each item. Instead of just selling clothes, I wanted to offer a piece of the designer's journey, the material story, and the process that went into creating each product. I wasn't even sure how I would make it work, but the concept kept buzzing in my head, and the more I thought about it, the more it felt like something the world needed. I had no idea where to start. My friends thought I was crazy. You're going to leave your stable job to start a fashion brand? With no experience? They said. The fear of failure was terrifying, but the idea of living with regret was worse. So, one morning I decided to jump in head first. I left my job and started working on the brand full-time. At first, I didn't even know how to properly source fabric or find manufacturers. I began emailing companies, looking for sustainable options, but every time I mentioned the word sustainability, the prices doubled. I learned quickly that most businesses didn't care about the environment. They cared about the bottom line. After countless hours of research, I finally found a small, ethical manufacturer in India. They were willing to take on my small order, but it would be expensive. I didn't have much savings left, so I decided to bootstrap the entire operation. I put every last cent into getting the first batch of clothes made. I even sold my car to raise the rest of the money I needed. The idea was simple. If I could just sell enough of these products, I could keep the business alive and grow. The first batch came in, and I was ecstatic. But then reality hit. The clothes were beautiful, but I had no clue how to market them. I spent hours learning about digital marketing, social media, and e-commerce. I built a simple website and started posting on Instagram. At first, it felt like I was shouting into the void. I had 0 followers, and the engagement was dismal. But I kept pushing. Every day, I posted something new, shared the process behind the designs, and told the story of where the materials came from. Slowly, very slowly, people started to take notice. I reached out to bloggers and influencers, offering them a chance to try the products in exchange for a review. Some said yes, and that's when things started to pick up. I can't explain the feeling of seeing someone wearing your product for the first time. It was surreal. The brand began to build momentum, but just as I was starting to gain traction, the biggest challenge of all came: cash flow. My margins were razor thin, and I was spending everything on manufacturing and marketing. I couldn't afford to restock the inventory fast enough to meet demand. I reached out to a few potential investors, but most turned me down, citing the fact that I wasn't yet profitable and didn't have a clear path to profitability. I felt like I was at a breaking point, but I refused to quit. I kept hustling, finding creative ways to raise capital. I borrowed money from friends, used my credit cards, and even ran a small Kickstarter campaign to fund the next collection. It worked. Slowly but surely, I was able to keep the lights on. I managed to bring on a small team to help with design and customer service. But it was still a grind. Every month was a battle to stay afloat. Every day, I worried that I'd wake up to an empty bank account or an angry customer. I lost sleep, worked through weekends, and made sacrifices in my personal life. There were moments when I wanted to throw in the towel, but I remembered why I started. Then, in 2016, something unexpected happened. A well-known fashion magazine discovered our brand and did a feature on us. It was like someone flipped a switch. Orders came flooding in. The exposure gave us the boost we needed to scale, and I was finally able to hire a full-time team to handle operations, marketing, and design. Over the next few years, we grew rapidly. We expanded the product line, added accessories, and even started collaborating with other designers and artists. What started as a small idea in my apartment had now turned into a full-fledged business. We weren't just selling clothes. We were selling a lifestyle, a mindset, and a story that resonated with people. But success didn't come without its challenges. As we grew, the pressure to keep up with demand became overwhelming. The market was changing too. People wanted faster shipping, better customer service, and even more sustainable options. I found myself constantly innovating, trying to stay ahead of the curve. It was exhausting, but the satisfaction of seeing people connect with the brand kept me going. In 2020, we hit a major milestone. We became a certified B Corporation. It was a proud moment, but also a reminder that the journey was far from over. Being a B Corp meant that we were held accountable to the highest social and environmental standards, and I took that responsibility seriously. We pushed even harder to reduce our carbon footprint, improve labor conditions, and create more transparency in our supply chain. By 2023, the company was doing well, profitable, stable, and continuing to grow. I finally took a step back and reflected on how far we'd come. It wasn't just the financial success that made me proud. It was the fact that we had created something that mattered. People believed in our mission, and that gave me a sense of purpose that no paycheck could ever provide. Looking back on everything, I'm grateful for the hard times. The stress, the fear of failure, and the sleepless nights all shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. There were so many moments where I could have quit, but I didn't. And now, I have a business that not only supports me, but also makes a difference in the world. My advice to anyone starting out is simple. Start before you're ready. The path won't be easy, but if you keep pushing, you might just surprise yourself with what you're capable of. And always remember, success isn't just about making money. It's about creating something that makes a difference. I still remember the first time I felt like I had finally made it as an entrepreneur. I was sitting in my small, cramped office in a run-down building downtown, staring at the bank statement on my screen. The numbers on the page weren't massive, but they were enough to know I was no longer living paycheck to paycheck. The sense of relief washed over me, but not the way you might think. It wasn't the sense of success so much as the realization that I'd made it through the storm. My name is Jake, and my story begins with a failed startup, a mountain of debt, and a determination that wouldn't quit. It wasn't always easy, and there were days when I thought about giving up, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. If you're someone with a big idea or a dream of starting something of your own, this story might hit close to home. I didn't come from a rich family or a business-savvy background. My parents were teachers, and while they instilled in me the importance of education, business wasn't something that was ever discussed around the dinner table. I went to a state university, studied marketing, and figured I'd follow the conventional route into a corporate job. But after graduation, I was struck by a thought that changed everything. What if I could do this on my own? At the time, I was working as a marketing assistant at a tech startup. I was fresh out of college, eager to prove myself, but the longer I worked there, the more I realized that corporate life wasn't for me. I didn't like the hierarchy, the lack of flexibility, or the idea of being stuck in a 9-to-5 grind. I wanted to be the one making decisions, not just carrying out orders. I came up with an idea for an app that would help small businesses connect with local customers. I had done some research, and it seemed like there was a gap in the market. But what I didn't realize was how much of a leap it would be to go from thinking about an idea to actually building a business around it. I decided to quit my job, a decision that, in retrospect, I should have thought about more carefully. I had a little savings, a small loan from my parents, and a whole lot of ambition. I rented a small office, bought a used laptop, and started working on the app. It was my first foray into the world of entrepreneurship, and I quickly learned that it wasn't just about the idea. It was about execution. I spent months coding the app, working 18-hour days, and surviving mostly on ramen noodles and coffee. There were countless nights where I questioned whether I was wasting my time. The app wasn't coming together the way I imagined. The initial version was glitchy, the design was horrible, and the user experience was confusing. But I couldn't stop. I was already in too deep, and failure wasn't an option. I launched the beta version of the app, which was basically just a half-finished prototype, and I did what I could to promote it. I reached out to local businesses, told anyone who would listen about my app, and offered free trials. Some businesses bit, but most didn't. The few who did sign up didn't use it much, and those who tried it didn't see the value in it. The feedback was harsh. Your app is slow. It doesn't solve my problem. And the worst of all, this is just another useless idea. By the end of the first year, I was broke. My savings were gone. The loan from my parents had been used up, and I had racked up thousands of dollars in credit card debt. I was sleeping on a friend's couch, barely scraping by. I had no choice but to keep going. The dream of building something meaningful kept me awake at night, and I refused to give up. But if I'm being honest, there were moments when I seriously considered throwing in the towel. Then came the turning point. I had just gotten an email from a small local business owner named Sarah. She was a florist who had started using my app a few months ago, and while I had thought her business had fizzled out like the rest, she reached out with feedback. I love your app, but it could be so much better if it did X, Y, and Z. I've been able to get more customers, but it's not quite right yet. I looked at her message and realized something. Sarah wasn't just offering criticism. She was offering a solution. She saw the potential in what I had created, and she was willing to help me make it better. I realized then that the businesses I had been focusing on didn't need a one-size-fits-all app. They needed something personalized. I spent the next month reworking the entire app based on her feedback, and it changed everything. Sarah wasn't the only business owner who offered feedback. Over the next few months, I began working closely with small business owners who were using the app. I learned more about their needs, what worked and what didn't. The more I understood my target market, the better I was able to refine my product. Around the same time, I met an investor at a local networking event. I had no intention of pitching my app. I just wanted to talk shop. But he asked about my business, and for the first time, I felt confident enough to explain my struggles and what I had been working on. To my surprise, he was intrigued. We set up a meeting, and after several rounds of discussions, he agreed to invest in my company. With that investment, I was able to build a real development team. We rebranded the app, revamped its features, and improved the user experience. And then the magic happened. The new version of the app caught on. Small businesses loved the personalized approach, and word spread. Slowly but surely, my app went from being a niche product to something that was actually useful. Fast forward to today, and I run a thriving tech company. My team has grown, our app has thousands of active users, and we're consistently profitable. I was able to pay off all my debts, and even better, I was able to pay back my parents. There are still challenges, and some days feel like a grind, but I no longer feel like I'm just surviving. In the end, it wasn't the app or the idea that made me successful. It was the willingness to listen, adapt, and keep going even when everything felt like it was falling apart. Entrepreneurship isn't just about launching a business. It's about learning from failure, finding ways to improve, and pushing forward even when you don't have all the answers. If you're thinking about starting your own business, know this: it's going to be tough. You'll face moments of doubt, failure, and frustration. But if you can push through those tough times and keep moving forward, you'll come out stronger on the other side. And who knows? Maybe one day you'll be looking at a bank statement, not with the goal of proving something to others, but as a sign of how far you've come. Keep going. It'll be worth it. I'll start by saying that I'm not a millionaire. I don't have a luxury car. I don't live in a mansion, and I definitely don't wear designer suits. But my entrepreneurial journey has been a roller coaster, and I've learned more than I ever thought I would. If you're interested in a story about struggle, persistence, and a little bit of luck, this might be for you. It all started about 5 years ago. I had just finished college and was struggling to find a job that didn't make me feel like I was wasting my potential. I had a degree in marketing, and despite the world telling me that the degree would lead to something great, it didn't. I sent out countless resumes, had interviews with no follow-ups, and after a year of grinding, realized that I was getting nowhere fast. The idea of working a 9-to-5 felt soul-crushing. It wasn't like I didn't have drive. I had ideas. I had ambition, but I had no clear path. I'll admit, I was terrified. I didn't know where to start. That's when I stumbled across a podcast about entrepreneurship. The host was talking about how anyone could start a business, how you could use what you already know and just go for it. It clicked. I want to be my own boss. I was sick of waiting around for someone to give me an opportunity. If I wasn't going to find a job, I'd make my own. My first business idea was simple, a social media management service. I had been freelancing for a while, doing small social media gigs for friends, so I figured, why not turn it into a full-time business? I wasn't exactly rolling in cash, so I used what little savings I had to set up a website and create some marketing materials. I spent hours Googling how to set up a business, how to legally register it, and what the hell an LLC even was. I had no clue, but I was determined to figure it out. I went full speed ahead, emailing local businesses and offering my services. I started with small mom-and-pop shops, knowing that they probably didn't have the budget for big agencies. To my surprise, a few of them actually said yes. I signed my first 2 clients within the first month, and I couldn't believe it. I was doing it, I was running a business. But here's where the story gets interesting. The reality of running a business wasn't anything like the podcasts and success stories made it seem. I quickly realized that managing clients, setting up payment systems, and handling customer service was far more time-consuming than just doing the work. I had to learn how to organize my schedule, how to manage multiple projects at once, and how to deal with clients who didn't always know what they wanted. I started to feel the pressure. Some clients were great, but others were a nightmare. One of my first clients asked for revisions every other day and would change their mind constantly. It felt like I couldn't keep up, and I was scared I'd lose them if I didn't meet their expectations. I was working 12-hour days, barely scraping by, and doubting myself constantly. I was burned out, but I kept going because I didn't want to let anyone down. I also didn't want to admit to myself that I might have made a mistake by starting this whole thing. But then, something unexpected happened. One of my clients, the difficult one, came back to me with a big request. They were a small restaurant, and they wanted me to handle all of their marketing. They wanted to grow their online presence, and after months of working with them, they trusted me. It wasn't a huge job, but it was big enough to get my foot in the door with a larger clientele. They refer me to other businesses in the area, and soon I was working with several restaurants and cafes, helping them build their brands and grow their social media following. It wasn't easy, and I still had moments where I doubted myself, but over time, I began to build momentum. Word of mouth spread, and I was able to raise my rates. As my client list grew, I realized that I couldn't do everything by myself. I hired a couple of freelance designers and writers to help me with the workload. Slowly, I started to build a small team, and the business began to grow faster than I had ever imagined. Now, let me be clear, this doesn't mean I had it all figured out. The pressure of managing clients, paying employees, handling taxes, and figuring out how to reinvest in the business was overwhelming. I made mistakes, and I still make them today. I made bad hires. I mismanaged cash flow. I underpriced my services at the beginning. But through all of it, I kept learning, adapting, and pushing forward. Fast forward a couple of years, and my business had grown enough that I was able to hire full-time employees. I built a small office space, started offering additional services, and eventually branched out into digital advertising and SEO. I went from being a one-man operation to running a team of 10 people. The client base had expanded beyond local businesses to include companies from all over the country. But just when I thought I had everything figured out, COVID hit. The pandemic was a punch to the gut. Restaurants and small businesses that I had built relationships with for years started closing their doors. Marketing budgets were slashed. Clients started canceling their contracts. I watched my business shrink before my eyes, and I feared the worst. At this point, I had to make a decision. Do I give up? Do I shut the doors and start over? Or do I pivot? I decided to pivot. I knew the businesses I worked with still needed marketing, but they couldn't afford the same services anymore. So, I shifted my focus to offering more affordable, do-it-yourself services for small business owners who were struggling. I started creating easy-to-use marketing tools and templates that helped businesses maintain an online presence without breaking the bank. This allowed me to keep revenue coming in while also helping my clients stay afloat during tough times. It wasn't the same as before, but it was enough to survive. The pandemic taught me a lot about flexibility, about resilience, and about the importance of thinking outside the box. The business weathered the storm, and as things began to stabilize, I had a renewed sense of purpose. Today, the business is still growing, though, at a slower pace. I've had my fair share of challenges, but I've also had some huge wins. I've learned more in these past few years than I ever thought possible. The most important lesson? Success doesn't happen overnight. It's messy, it's uncertain, and it requires constant adaptation. To anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, it's not easy, but if you're passionate and willing to put in the work, it's possible. The road is long, and it's filled with ups and downs, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. There's a certain freedom in being your own boss, but that freedom comes with responsibility, and you need to be ready for that. So, yeah, I'm not a millionaire, but I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm just getting started. AITA for refusing to let my sister's kids stay with me anymore after what they did to my dog. I, 33F, live alone with my dog, Oliver. He's a 6-year-old golden retriever, extremely gentle, well-behaved, and basically my best friend. I work from home and don't have children of my own, so Oliver is like family to me. My sister, Jen, 36F, is a single mom of 3, ages 9, 7, and 5. She's had a rough go of it lately, and over the past year I've tried to help out however I can, including watching her kids some weekends so she can work overtime or just get a break. At first, it was fine. The kids were a bit rowdy, as kids are, but they seemed to like Oliver. He was patient with them even when they got a little handsy. But over time, I started to notice some concerning behavior. The kids would pull his ears or tail, try to ride him like a pony, chase him around the house until he hid in the laundry room. I would intervene every time, tell them not to do that, and explain that they could hurt him or scare him. Jen always brushed it off. They're just playing, or he's a dog, he'll be fine. I asked her to back me up and set clearer boundaries with them, but she'd laugh it off or say I was being dramatic. 3 weeks ago, I had the kids over again for a weekend. I told Jen that if they couldn't respect Oliver, I wouldn't be able to watch them anymore. She gave me a yeah kind of response and dropped them off. The first day was okay, but Sunday afternoon, I was in the kitchen making lunch when I suddenly heard Oliver yell from the backyard. I ran out to find the kids had somehow gotten into the garage, taken duct tape and some string, and were trying to train Oliver. They had taped his tail and ears, tied a rope around his belly like a leash, and were trying to make him do tricks by pulling him in different directions. I lost it. I untied and unwrapped Oliver, who was shaking and had a raw spot on his belly from the rope, and yelled at the kids to go inside. I called Jen and told her to come get them immediately. She was annoyed but came over. When she saw Oliver, she rolled her eyes and said, "They're just being imaginative. You need to chill. He's a dog." That was the final straw for me. I told her I wouldn't be watching the kids anymore. Not now, not ever. She said I was punishing her for being a single mom and that I was choosing a pet over family. I told her if her kids can't treat living beings with respect, then they're not welcome in my home. Since then, things have gotten ugly. She told my parents, who are now mad at me for abandoning Jen when she needs support. They say I should be helping more, not less. That Oliver is fine, and kids will be kids. That Jen is overwhelmed, and I need to have empathy. I love my sister and my nieces and nephew, but I can't put Oliver at risk like that again. He's been anxious since that weekend, flinches when the doorbell rings, and won't go into the backyard without me. I've taken him to the vet Thankfully, he's physically okay, but behaviorally, it's like he's changed. I've explained all this, but everyone just keeps saying I'm overreacting. My brother even accused me of emotional displacement, saying I treat my dog like a child because I don't have any, and that I'm projecting. Maybe I'm a little overattached to Oliver. Maybe do treat him like a child. But does that mean I should let him be tormented in his own home? Is it really that unreasonable to say I won't watch kids who can't respect animals? Jen's called me multiple times begging for just one weekend because she needs to work a double shift. I told her no again. Now she won't speak to me at all. My parents say I should just supervise more closely or put Oliver in another room. But why should my dog be locked away in his own house for the comfort of kids who don't respect him? I'm starting to feel guilty. Maybe I'm making too big a deal of this. But I also feel like if I don't take this seriously, something worse could happen. Oliver can't speak for himself. I'm the only advocate he has. So, AITA for refusing to watch my sister's kids anymore after what they did to my dog. I grew up in a small town where the concept of entrepreneurship was nothing but a distant fantasy. Most people worked traditional jobs, and the idea of starting a business was something only the rich or well-connected could afford to dream about. My family wasn't poor, but we certainly weren't wealthy either. My parents were hardworking people, doing their best to keep things afloat. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom was a school teacher. Both of them worked long hours, yet the comfort of financial security always seemed just out of reach. As a teenager, I was never the most academically inclined, and while I had some talent for sports, I was never good enough to think about scholarships. Instead, I spent most of my time thinking about how I could break the mold and achieve something bigger than what was expected of me. I wasn't looking to be rich for the sake of it, but I wanted freedom. I wanted the ability to make my own decisions, take risks, and create something that would stand the test of time. The spark for my entrepreneurial journey ignited during a summer job when I was 19. I was working at a local convenience store, and I remember this one moment clearly. A customer came in asking for a specific brand of energy drink, but we didn't carry it. She was frustrated and ended up leaving without buying anything. I thought to myself, what if I could create a store that sold all the things people wanted but couldn't easily find? That was the first seed planted in my mind. That summer, I began researching the idea of opening a small business. I spent every free moment reading books, listening to podcasts, and watching YouTube videos about entrepreneurship. I learned about everything from business planning to marketing, and while I didn't know everything, I was convinced that I could make it work. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. I didn't have much money saved up, but I was determined to make it happen. I started small, using the little savings I had from my convenience store job and taking a small loan for a local bank. I launched my first venture at 21, a small online store specializing in niche health and wellness products. It wasn't the glamorous dream of opening a brick-and-mortar shop, but it was a start. The idea was simple: sell high-quality, hard-to-find health supplements and products that weren't readily available in my small town. I didn't know the first thing about running an online store, so I had to learn everything from scratch. I remember staying up late at night learning how to build a website, choosing the right products, and dealing with suppliers. The learning curve was steep, and the first few months were incredibly stressful. The real breakthrough came when I finally managed to drive some traffic to my website. I spent a lot of time experimenting with Facebook ads, Google ads, and influencer marketing. I didn't have a big budget, so I had to be very strategic about where I spent my money. Slowly but surely, I started making sales. At first, it was just a trickle, but then it started to snowball. One product went viral on Instagram, and suddenly I had hundreds of orders coming in every day. I could barely keep up with the demand. The early success was both thrilling and terrifying. As my business grew, so did my responsibilities. I had to hire employees, find a warehouse, and deal with inventory management. My personal life started to take a hit as I worked long hours, but I was driven by the belief that this business would change my life. I learned quickly that managing a growing business was far from easy, and there were times when I questioned whether I was in over my head. The pressure was immense, and there were moments when I was tempted to throw in the towel. But every time I thought about quitting, I reminded myself of why I started in the first place. I wanted the freedom to make my own decisions, to create something from nothing and to prove to myself that I could succeed. Around the 2-year mark, my business hit a major roadblock. We were growing rapidly, but the financial side of things wasn't keeping up. I had overextended myself by taking on too many expenses without properly managing cash flow. I was losing money, and I knew I needed to find a solution fast. I took a step back, analyzed my situation, and realized that I had been focusing too much on growth without considering the fundamentals of my business. It was a tough pill to swallow, but I knew I needed to make changes. I took out another small loan to help cover the cash flow gap, but this time I used the money to restructure my operations. I streamlined the supply chain, negotiated better deals with suppliers, and improved my inventory management. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Slowly, things started to stabilize. My profits began to grow, and the pressure eased. The next phase of my business was about scaling. I invested more in digital marketing, hired a full-time team to handle customer service, and started expanding my product range. I also started building partnerships with influencers and content creators who could help promote my products. It wasn't until the 4th year that I finally hit the level of success I had dreamed about when I first started. The business was no longer just a side hustle. It was a full-fledged company. I had employees, a solid customer base, and a steady stream of revenue. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my entrepreneurial journey. Looking back, the path wasn't always easy. There were moments when I felt like giving up, moments when I doubted my abilities, and moments when I questioned whether this was really what I wanted. But those challenges shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. If I had given up during the hard times, I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't have the freedom that entrepreneurship has given me, and I wouldn't have learned the valuable lessons that came with the struggles. Today, my business has expanded beyond what I could have ever imagined when I was working at that convenience store. I've opened several more online stores, invested in real estate, and even started a small venture capital fund to help other entrepreneurs get their start. I've learned that success isn't about taking huge risks or having a perfect plan. It's about persistence, learning from your mistakes, and continuously improving. I'm not where I thought I'd be 5 years ago, but I'm in a much better place than I ever could have imagined. I still have big goals, but I've learned to enjoy the journey along the way. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Entrepreneurship isn't a straight line. It's messy, full of ups and downs, but if you're persistent and willing to learn from your mistakes, anything is possible. I started my entrepreneurial journey almost by accident. It was the summer of 2017, and I was working a mundane 9 to 5 job at a software company. My title was Business Development Associate, which in reality meant I was just cold calling potential clients and trying to upsell them on products they didn't really need. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and I didn't mind it much at first. But as the months went by, something inside me started to itch. I was craving more freedom, more excitement, and more control over my own future. I had always been interested in technology and innovation, but it was a hobby more than anything. I loved reading about how companies like Apple, Amazon, and Tesla were disrupting industries. I admired entrepreneurs who had the guts to take risks and build something from the ground up. Yet, I never thought of myself as one of them. I told myself that entrepreneurship was for people who were smarter, more driven, and, frankly, luckier than I was. But one evening, after a long day of mindless calls, I went home and sat down with a cold beer, scrolling through Reddit. That was when I stumbled across a post in a subreddit about side hustles. Someone had shared their story of how they started an online store selling phone accessories. They didn't have much capital to begin with, just a few $100, but they had grown their side hustle into a profitable business over the course of a year. The post was long, detailed, and full of the gritty reality of what it took to build something from scratch. Mistakes, failures, and moments of doubt. But the takeaway was clear. If they could do it, so could I. It wasn't a light bulb moment, but it was definitely a spark. That night, I spent hours reading about dropshipping, e-commerce, and online business models. I researched everything I could find, watching YouTube tutorials, reading blogs, and diving deep into the world of Shopify and AliExpress. I knew that if I was going to leave my job, I needed something that would sustain me. and e-commerce seemed like the perfect gateway. But of course, I had no idea where to begin. The first problem was choosing a product. I had no experience in product development, and I wasn't sure what niche would work. I thought about the stuff I use on a daily basis, gadgets, phone accessories, and the like. But after researching, I realized that the market was oversaturated. It was hard to compete with giants like Amazon, and I didn't have the resources to deal with inventory or customer service for physical products. That's when I stumbled upon the idea of digital products. I had always been passionate about design and had a fair understanding of Photoshop and Illustrator. I thought, why not create downloadable templates for social media posts, business flyers, or resume designs? I could design them once and sell them repeatedly without worrying about inventory or shipping. I spent the next few weeks designing templates in my spare time after work. I set up a Shopify store, bought a domain, and started learning how to market the products. I had no social media presence, no email list, and no idea how to drive traffic to my site, but I pushed forward. The first few months were rough. I spent countless hours tweaking my website, designing new templates, and learning how to use Instagram and Facebook ads. I had little to no sales at first, and I was starting to feel the weight of my decision. Was this really worth it? Should I just give up and focus on my job? But something inside me refused to quit. I realized that if I didn't at least try, I'd never know if this was the right path for me. I started testing different ads, targeting various audiences, and slowly, sales trickled in. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. I made my first $100, then $200, and eventually I was pulling in a steady stream of income. In the meantime, I quit my day job. The idea of working for someone else for the rest of my life seemed suffocating. With the extra time, I focused all my energy on improving my business. I created more templates, improved my website's user experience, and started offering custom design services. Word of mouth helped spread the word, and soon enough, I had a small community of loyal customers. I reinvested everything I made back into the business, hiring contractors to help with marketing and design so I could focus on scaling. By 2019, I had reached a level of income where I no longer had to worry about paying my bills. I could travel, enjoy life, and, most importantly, work on something I truly loved. But the growth didn't stop there. I wanted to expand. I began offering other digital products like online courses, teaching design to people who wanted to start their own businesses. It was a natural extension of the skills I had developed, and it allowed me to diversify my income streams. In 2020, I took a big leap and launched a subscription service where customers could access new templates every month. The idea was risky. I had no idea how people would respond to a recurring payment model, but it worked. Subscriptions started rolling in, and my business hit new heights. I had built something that wasn't just a one-time purchase. It became a sustainable, recurring source of income. Looking back now, I realized that the key to my success wasn't some brilliant idea or the perfect timing. It was persistence. There were so many moments when I felt like quitting, when I doubted myself and my ability to succeed. But I kept going even when things were tough. I failed repeatedly, but I learned from those failures. I grew, I adapted, and I pushed forward. In 2021, I brought on my first full-time employee, and by 2022, my business had grown into a team of 10 people. We had a thriving community of customers, and I was no longer just a one-person operation. But I never forgot where I came from, the late nights spent researching, designing, and hustling to make ends meet. Now, I'm able to give back in ways I never imagined. I mentor aspiring entrepreneurs, offering advice and guidance to those who are just starting out. I've also been able to donate to causes I care about, something I never would have been able to do if I'd stayed in my old job. The road to entrepreneurship is not easy, and it's not always glamorous. There were plenty of sleepless nights, countless failures, and times when I thought I was in over my head. But today, I can honestly say that building my own business was the best decision I ever made. If you're sitting on the fence, wondering if you should take the leap, my advice is simple. Do it. The worst thing that can happen is you'll learn something valuable. And that's worth more than any paycheck. Sometimes, all it takes is a spark to get you started. And that's all it took for me. AITA for telling my sister I won't be her maid of honor because I can't pretend her fiancé isn't the guy who bullied me all through high school. This has been a mess since the moment she announced her engagement, and now my family is split, and I'm being accused of holding a grudge for too long. I need to know if I'm being unreasonable here. I'm 28F. My sister, we'll call her Lily, is 30F, and she's getting married this October. I was initially really excited for her when she got engaged, until I found out who the groom was, Ryan. Ryan and I went to the same high school. We were only one grade apart, and we were both in drama club, so we interacted a lot. And he made my life hell. It wasn't the stereotypical shove you in a locker bullying. It was quieter, more insidious. He made fun of how I looked, called me mule face because of my teeth, spread rumors that I was into one of our teachers. Once convinced half the club that I tried to sabotage someone's audition just to get a better role. I was never actually punished, but my reputation was trash for the rest of high school. I ate lunch in the library alone most days. It got to the point where I begged my mom to let me switch schools junior year. She didn't, because she said I was too sensitive and needed to learn to deal with people. I internalized a lot of it. For a long time, I believed that I was the problem. Fast forward a decade. I've done a ton of therapy, gotten a great job, found a solid friend group. I'm not perfect, but I'm okay. Then, last year, Lily brings Ryan to Thanksgiving and introduces him as her boyfriend. I felt like the floor disappeared. He looked different, filled out, confident, grown up. But I recognized him immediately. At first, I just sat through dinner quietly. I was so stunned, I didn't know how to react. He didn't say anything to me directly besides basic politeness, and I thought maybe he didn't even remember me. But that illusion was shattered after dinner when I caught him smirking at me and whispering something to Lily, who laughed and gave me this look I can't even describe, like pity and amusement all at once. I told Lily afterward that Ryan used to bully me. She acted shocked, said she had no idea, and asked for examples. I gave her a few, and she said, "Wow, that sucks, but maybe he's changed?" I said I didn't care if he had changed. I just didn't want to be around him. She told me that I needed to grow up, and that people aren't their high school selves forever. After that, I avoided seeing them together. If he was going to be a family function, I made an excuse. This pissed off my parents, who thought I was being dramatic. My mom said I was just jealous Lily was getting married first. My dad stayed mostly out of it, but told me to try to let things go. No one ever said anything to Ryan. Then a few weeks ago, Lily asked me to be her maid of honor. I was surprised. We were never super close, and especially not after the Ryan stuff came up. She said she wanted to bridge the distance, and that this could be a healing opportunity for us. I said no. She was shocked and hurt. I told her, plainly, that I couldn't stand beside her and smile while she married someone who made my life miserable for years. She said again that he's changed, and that I should talk to him. I told her I wasn't interested in talking it out with someone who never even apologized. She called me selfish, said I was making her wedding about me, and trying to sabotage the most important day of her life over stuff from a decade ago. I told her that if Ryan wanted to make amends, he had 10 years and never once tried. That I wasn't stopping her from marrying him, but I wouldn't pretend to be okay with it. I thought that was reasonable. Apparently not. My parents are furious. They said I'm tearing the family apart over some teenage drama. My mom especially has gone all in on defending Ryan, saying I misinterpreted things and that I always looked for reasons to be a victim. Lily uninvited me from the wedding altogether last week. Then she told our relatives that I refused to come out of jealousy and bitterness. Now my cousins are texting me asking what my problem is and why I'm trying to hurt Lily on purpose. The thing is, I never told her not to marry him. I never made demands. I just said I couldn't be her maid of honor. But it's turned into this huge family crisis. Part of me wonders if I really am overreacting, if maybe I should let it go, if it's really fair to judge someone forever on what they did at 17. But then I think about the nights I cried myself to sleep, about how I dreaded going to school every day, about how I still flinch when I hear certain phrases he used to say to me. And I feel like maybe I'm not the crazy one. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to be my sister's maid of honor because I still remember what her fiancé did to me in high school. AITA for refusing to let my sister walk down the aisle at my wedding after what she did to my fiancé. I 28F, got married 2 months ago to the love of my life, Adam, 31M. We've been together for 6 years, and he's been nothing but kind, loving, patient, and stable through all of life's ups and downs. My family has always liked him, or so I thought. The drama centers around my younger sister, Dana, 25F. Dana has always been the charismatic one, outgoing, fun, the kind of person who makes fast friends and gets away with things because of her charm. She's the kind of person who can crash a party she wasn't invited to and still somehow leave with a gift bag. Growing up, I played second fiddle to her a lot. I was the quieter one, the studious one. My parents didn't mean to compare us, but they did. If Dana got a B, it was great effort. If I got an A-, it was what happened. That kind of thing. Despite that, I've tried hard not to let old resentments fester. I asked Dana to be my maid of honor because I wanted to include her and show that I trusted her. She seemed genuinely excited and promised to help out however she could. I honestly thought this wedding might bring us closer. The real issue began about a month before the wedding. Adam came home one night looking pale and confused. He sat me down and said, "I need to tell you something. I don't want to keep secrets." He then told me that Dana had tried to kiss him. It happened when they met up for lunch to discuss the bachelorette party. She'd asked him to help her surprise me with something sweet and romantic. Apparently, over drinks, she started reminiscing about their first meeting, complimenting his looks and saying things like, "If you weren't with my sister." Then she leaned in. He pulled back immediately and told her, "This is not okay." Then he left. At first, I was stunned. I didn't want to believe it. My brain tried to make excuses. Maybe he misread something? Maybe she was drunk and confused? But Adam showed me texts she sent afterward. Stuff like, "Please don't tell her. It was a mistake. I was just emotional. And you're such a good guy. I always wondered what would have happened if I met you first." My stomach turned. I confronted Dana the next day. She denied it first, then tried to downplay it. "It was just a moment. It didn't mean anything. You're blowing this out of proportion." When I told her she was no longer my maid of honor and that I needed space, she lost it. She screamed at me, called me insecure, accused Adam of exaggerating to cover something up, and even said, "You think he's perfect, but he'll screw you over just like every guy eventually does." I told her I didn't want her in the wedding anymore, period. Not as a bridesmaid, not walking down the aisle, not even in the family photos. That led to a full-blown war within my family. My mom said I was overreacting. She made a mistake, but she's your sister. Don't throw away family over a misunderstanding. My dad was more neutral but urged me to keep the peace. My older brother was the only one who said, "Honestly, I'd have done worse if I were in your shoes." The wedding came. Dana wasn't in it. She came to the ceremony, but sat with a scowl the whole time. She didn't talk to me, didn't smile in a single photo, and left before the reception. My mother gave me hell for it afterward, saying I ruined the family dynamic over some drama that could have been handled privately. Now 2 months later, we're still barely speaking. My parents keep trying to arrange family dinners, but I've refused to go if Dana is there. Adam backs me completely and says he'd rather cut contact than be gaslit like that again. But I'm starting to wonder, was I too harsh? Did I let my emotions take over? Some of my extended family are saying things like sisters fight. It doesn't mean you exile them. A cousin told me that weddings are emotional, and Dana probably just had a breakdown and didn't mean to cross the line. Even a friend of mine said she didn't sleep with him, she just made a pass. It was wrong, but not unforgivable. But to me, it felt like a betrayal on multiple levels. She not only disrespected my relationship, but then tried to gaslight both of us afterward. And worse, she made me question my own judgment and nearly ruined my wedding week with her drama. Still, I can't help wondering, AITA for banning her from walking in my wedding over what she did? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.